On September 14, 2024, Lucas Perrin, 28, an experienced wildlife photographer with a fascination for marine life, and his longtime friend, Marc Dubois, 29, a professional diving instructor with a calm and methodical approach to the sea, set out from a small harbor on Réunion Island, eager to document green sea turtles in their natural habitat. The morning air was humid and salty, carrying the sharp scent of ocean and algae. At the same time, the calm waters reflected the rising sun in a shimmering sheet, promising a serene day perfect for observing the elusive creatures they sought. Both men had kayaked these waters many times, familiar with the currents, tides, and the behavior of local wildlife. They carried lightweight cameras and snorkeling gear in waterproof containers, confident that the day would pass without incident. They paddled in measured strokes, scanning the surface and occasional shallow reefs for signs of turtles, noting the gentle swell beneath their craft, the way sunlight pierced the water in golden shafts, illuminating the rich marine life below. Fish darted among corals, the occasional shadow passing overhead, prompting a momentary pause as Lucas raised his camera, eager to capture every detail. At the same time, Marc charted their position, guiding the kayak through the safest waters. The ocean seemed tranquil, almost hypnotic, a world apart from the noise and chaos of their daily lives, inviting focus and calm, a place where patience was rewarded with glimpses of nature's fragile wonders. Then, without warning, the water beneath them exploded in a sudden eruption of motion, as though some enormous force had pierced the sea itself. From below, a massive tiger shark, estimated at 4.2 meters in length, shot upward with astonishing speed, its streamlined body cutting through the water like a living torpedo. The kayak lurched violently, tipping sharply to one side as the predator collided with the underside, and both men were thrown into the churning water with a force that left their limbs flailing and hearts pounding with immediate terror. Salt water filled their mouths and eyes, stinging as they surfaced gasping, adrenaline spiking in waves that made their muscles twitch uncontrollably with both fear and exertion. The shark circled them immediately, its massive head cutting arcs beneath the surface, eyes cold and unblinking, nostrils flaring as it assessed the intruders. Marc tried to maintain composure, kicking toward the overturned kayak to retrieve whatever they could, but the creature's curiosity, and likely hunger, kept it within striking distance. Lucas's chest was jarred violently when the shark rammed him, the serrated teeth tearing through the fabric of his life vest, cutting shallow but precise slashes that sent sharp pain through his torso and left him momentarily winded. Water surged around them as the predator circled back, the surface erupting with froth as it lunged again, brushing against the tips of the kayak and testing their resolve with every pass. The two men kicked frantically, desperate to gain distance, scanning the water for anything that could offer support or protection. Floating debris from a nearby wreck bobbed in the current, and they paddled toward it with trembling hands, striking the shark with improvised blows from their paddles whenever it came too close. Each strike met resistance in the water, the impact vibrating up their arms but proving at least momentarily effective in forcing the predator to retreat. Every second felt like a lifetime as the men's hearts pounded, muscles screaming with fatigue, yet the shark remained relentless, circling and snapping in arcs that sent towering waves spilling over their heads, turning the calm waters they had so admired into a roiling, chaotic battlefield. Hours, or what felt like hours, passed in this tense struggle, though in reality only minutes had elapsed. As the shark tested their endurance and fear with relentless precision, the deep blue surrounding them both was a mesmerizing and terrifying backdrop for the primal dance of survival. Their lungs burned with each gasp, each breath a battle against the saline choke of the sea, while their hands and legs, soaked and battered, fought to keep them moving, striking, pushing, and evading the predator that seemed determined to assert its dominance over them in these once tranquil waters. Fortune finally intervened when the distant sound of an engine cut through the chaos, a small fishing boat coming into view, its crew shouting and maneuvering to their aid. Seeing the craft, Lucas and Marc kicked with renewed strength, signaling frantically as the shark made one final snapping pass beneath the hull, its teeth glinting in the sunlight, a last terrifying reminder of its immense power. The fishing crew managed to haul both men aboard, their bodies trembling, lungs heaving, and limbs trembling with the combined shock, exertion, and relief of narrowly escaping one of the ocean's most formidable predators. Medical attention was swift and urgent. Lucas had deep abdominal cuts from the life vest, jagged and painful, while Mark bore broken ribs and bruises along his chest and sides, evidence of the collisions and strikes during the ordeal. Both men were conscious but shaken, adrenaline slowly ebbing and leaving them with raw exhaustion and the lingering echo of fear in their minds. Each silently acknowledged how quickly the familiar waters of their home and work could transform into chaotic arenas at the whim of a powerful predator driven by instinct, curiosity, and hunger. Even as they were treated and stabilized, the events replayed in their minds. The sudden explosive violence of the shark's approach, the terrifying ease with which the enormous predator overturned their kayak, the grinding teeth cutting through life-saving equipment, the relentless circling and snapping that forced them to fight for every inch of safety. Every detail remained vivid, each flash of dorsal fin, every ripple of disturbed water imprinting itself on their memory in a way that would persist long after their bodies had healed. By the time they returned to the shore, the sun had lowered in the sky, casting elongated shadows over the reef and harbor, painting the scene with a deceptive calm that masked the terror they had endured just hours earlier. Both men, bloodied and exhausted, stepped onto solid ground with hearts still racing, aware that their survival had been the result of a combination of skill, quick thinking, and sheer luck. The encounter left them with a deep respect for the unpredictable nature of tiger sharks, creatures capable of transforming even the most placid waters into perilous arenas, and a lasting reminder that in the vast, powerful ocean, the line between awe and peril is often as thin as a flick of a fin. January 12, 2025. 8 tourists from Canada and Europe arrived at the hotel strip of Cancun, Mexico, excitement radiating as they prepared for a banana boat excursion that promised sun-soaked thrills across the turquoise Caribbean. Among them were Liam and Sophie Reynolds, a young couple from Toronto; Alex Muller, a 24-year-old German traveler seeking adventure; Clara Dubois, a 27-year-old from Paris who had never tried such a ride; and 4 others, their laughter filling the air as the crew explained the safety procedures. Life vests were fastened snugly, the inflatable banana boat secured to the motorized tow vessel, ready to skim across the waves. The morning sun glinted on the water, the surface sparkling deceptively, hiding the currents and unseen life beneath that carried both beauty and danger. The ride began smoothly, the banana boat bouncing over choppy swells, passengers gripping handles tightly as the vessel soared over crests and plummeted into troughs. Wind whipped through hair, salt stung faces, and laughter mingled with adrenaline as the crew pushed the boat faster, each wave a playful challenge. Lucas, the guide, maintained focus, confident that proximity to the shore and safety procedures made the excursion low risk. However, the Caribbean waters were home to large predators that could appear without warning. Then in an instant, chaos erupted. As the tow vessel executed a sharp turn, the nylon rope connecting the banana boat snapped, sending the passengers tumbling into the water roughly 150 meters from shore. Initial shock left limbs flailing, laughter dissolving into panic as everyone struggled to stay afloat. Saltwater burned eyes and mouths, and the current tugged unpredictably at bodies, separating the tourists and leaving each isolated and vulnerable. From the depths, a shadow emerged, moving with deliberate grace and deadly intent. A 3-meter bull shark, drawn by the splashing and scent of minor injuries from the fall, surged toward the nearest swimmer. Its first attack was swift and merciless. It clamped onto Alex Muller's leg, serrated teeth cutting through fabric and flesh, dragging him beneath the surface in a twisting, violent motion that sent shockwaves of terror through the remaining tourists. Clara flailed and screamed, water churning around her. At the same time, Liam and Sophie kicked desperately, trying to reach safety and shield others, adrenaline overriding fear just long enough for instinct to take control. The predator circled back immediately, striking again and clamping onto another tourist's thigh, the force throwing him backward in the waves, ribs jarring painfully as terror consumed him. Screams echoed across the water, mingling with the roar of the towboat's engine as Lucas signaled frantically to lifeguards patrolling nearby on jet skis. Accelerating toward the scene, the rescuers struck the water. They maneuvered aggressively, attempting to divert the shark's attention. But every pass of the predator churned the water into white froth, blood spreading in dark clouds around the struggling group. 2 lifeguards reached the most severely injured, hauling Alex and the man bitten in the thigh onto jet skis, racing toward shore while striking the water to deter the shark. Alex's leg was critically damaged, blood streaming freely while the second man clutched his thigh, pain and shock overtaking him. The other passengers, exhausted and trembling, clung to floating debris, hearts hammering, aware that survival had hung on a delicate balance of instinct, timing, and sheer luck. By the time all survivors were safely ashore, the playful excursion had been transformed into a grim tableau. Sand was streaked with blood, life vests lay scattered, and the air was heavy with shock, disbelief, and the fading hum of adrenaline. Paramedics stabilized injuries, cleaned wounds, and offered blankets to shivering, traumatized tourists. At the same time, their minds replayed every horrifying second. The snap of the tow rope, the violent tumble into the water, the first vicious bite, the circling predator, and the desperate struggle to reach safety with only jet skis, paddles, and instinct as allies. Even as authorities debriefed the group, the scene lingered vividly in their memory. The turquoise water transformed into a battlefield of primal fear. Each shadow now a potential threat, each splash a signal of danger, every detail etched into their minds with unforgiving clarity. What had begun as a playful, high-speed adventure became a confrontation with a creature perfectly adapted to dominance in its environment. A living reminder that the ocean, for all its beauty, could turn from leisure to life-or-death terror in seconds. For the 8 tourists, the day's events left an indelible mark, teaching the harsh lesson that even shallow, sun-drenched waters could hide immense power, and that the line between thrill and peril in the open sea is narrower than anyone can anticipate. The Caribbean, once a playground of sun and waves, had become a vivid testament to the unpredictability of nature and the fragile margin on which humans. June 21, 2025, Eric van Dalen, 41, a Dutch tourist with years of diving experience and a keen interest in marine wildlife, descended into the cool blue waters off Gansbaai, South Africa, eager to free-dive among the kelp forests and rocky reefs that stretched along the coastline. Known internationally as a hotspot for great white sharks, the area had drawn divers for decades, both for its rich marine life and the thrill of venturing into waters where apex predators ruled unseen beneath the waves. Eric had joined 3 friends on the morning dive, all seasoned enthusiasts who were confident in their skills and buoyed by the relatively calm day. With mild water temperatures and decent visibility for the season, they carried minimal gear, a wetsuit, weight belt, and camera, intending a leisurely exploration rather than a deep or prolonged descent, hoping to capture images of fish, rays, and the occasional curious seal as they moved silently through the swaying kelp. The initial dive proceeded as expected, with Eric gliding gracefully beneath the surface, camera in hand, adjusting fin strokes and breathing to maintain a slow, deliberate pace that allowed the water to envelope him in near silence. The only sounds the occasional rasp of exhaled bubbles and the distant call of seabirds from above. His friends followed at a safe distance, noting the sunlight streaming through the water and illuminating the undulating strands of kelp, painting a mesmerizing, almost hypnotic tableau across the sandy seabed. For nearly an hour, the dive remained tranquil, each moment steeped in concentration and calm, until an unseen presence shifted the current of events in an instant, turning serenity into sudden, irreversible chaos. When his friends surfaced, Eric was gone. At first, they thought he had simply ascended ahead or drifted slightly, but the buoy he had tied to himself bobbed lifelessly, and the camera floated nearby, lens glinting in the morning sun. Panic set in immediately, and they called for assistance from the dive boat, alerting the crew to the potential loss of a diver. A frantic search ensued, divers and crew scanning the area systematically, dragging fins and peering beneath the kelp canopy, but the water betrayed no clues. Minutes stretched to hours, with tension mounting as each sweep of the area yielded nothing more than drifting kelp and small fish. The silence between the searchers was almost oppressive in its intensity. Near the kelp line, about 20 meters from the surface entry point, the searchers discovered torn remnants of a weight belt, and further along, a shredded fin, fabric, and rubber, all jaggedly torn, lying in the gentle sway of the current. The signs were subtle but unmistakable, suggesting a sudden, violent encounter that left the diver incapacitated almost instantly. Divers spoke in hushed tones, exchanging glances heavy with disbelief and fear, as they recognized the telltale patterns of predatory activity in waters known for their great white sharks. Local authorities joined the search, deploying sonar and small submersibles, but as hours turned into a full day, hope began to diminish. By the second day, Eric's body remained elusive, swallowed by the vast, opaque blue that cloaked the coastline and the creatures that roamed it unseen. The grim breakthrough came unexpectedly. A 4.9-meter great white, captured for a routine tagging program in the same area, was brought aboard for examination. Marine biologists performed a careful dissection, documenting every detail of the shark's diet and physical condition. Inside the stomach, they found fragments of a wetsuit, a dive computer, and human tissue, which was later confirmed through forensic analysis to belong to Eric Van Dalen. The findings painted a chilling picture. The diver had been ambushed near the surface, likely bitten once and dragged under with such speed and efficiency that his companions had no chance to intervene, leaving the ocean around him deceptively calm as the predator executed its attack. Locals and diving guides, long accustomed to sightings of great whites in Gansbai, reacted with a mixture of horror and solemn respect. Even in a relatively shallow zone considered safe for recreational free diving, the event demonstrated the unpredictability and decisiveness of these apex predators. Experienced divers spoke of the stealth with which great whites could approach, striking without warning, and how easily even a well-prepared individual could be overwhelmed in seconds. The incident reminded them that proximity to land, familiarity with currents, or adherence to common safety measures did not guarantee protection from a creature built for power, speed, and precision. For Eric's friends, the loss was immediate and devastating. They had witnessed the preparation, the excitement, and the quiet exhilaration of exploring familiar waters, only to face the incomprehensible absence of a companion, their memories of laughter and shared adventure replaced by horror and grief. Rescue personnel and marine authorities coordinated follow-up efforts, posting warnings to nearby diving operations and issuing advisories. Still, the vast and indifferent ocean had claimed its victim, leaving little trace of the encounter beyond fragments of gear and the findings inside the stomach of the tagged shark. The dissection results became both a confirmation and a cautionary tale. Investigators concluded that Eric had been taken with almost surgical efficiency, the predator's bite and drag leaving nearly nothing recoverable outside of its own digestive system. For the wider diving community, the incident reinforced a sobering lesson. Apex predators do not distinguish between experience levels, dive plans, or zones labeled as safe. Their presence is constant, their hunting instincts acute, and their power overwhelming. Even in a controlled group dive, even in waters familiar to the most seasoned enthusiasts, one miscalculation or one moment of misfortune could result in irrevocable loss. In the days following the discovery, discussions among local operators and visiting divers emphasized the importance of vigilance, the necessity of safety equipment, and the respect due to creatures that ruled the underwater realm. Eric's disappearance and the subsequent confirmation of his death served as a stark reminder of the gulf between human confidence and the unpredictable force of nature. The great white shark's silent and decisive strike, leaving a permanent mark on the community and underscoring the sobering reality that, beneath the tranquil surface, the ocean could harbor lethal danger in a heartbeat. On January 9, 2024, snow drifted softly over the narrow fjords of northern Norway. The world was quiet, except for the crunch of ice breaking along the shoreline. For Lars Johansson, the cold landscape had always been a place of both challenge and peace. At 32, he was no stranger to the harsh conditions of his homeland. Born and raised in Tromsø, Lars had grown up learning how to live with the unforgiving elements. He became known in his community as a strong swimmer and endurance athlete, often testing himself in long-distance events and cold water plunges. To him, pushing through the cold was not only about strength, but also about finding calm in the silence of frozen places. This morning, Lars had prepared himself for a winter swim, something he had done many times before. He believed the fjords offered a kind of purity unmatched by pools or warmer seas. Clad only in a thin wetsuit, he lowered himself into the water, snowflakes melting instantly on contact with the dark, near-freezing surface. Each breath sent clouds of vapor into the air as his body adjusted to the shock. Around him, the fjord appeared calm, its waters glassy, reflecting the high cliffs and heavy clouds above. Beneath the surface, however, the picture was far less tranquil. Visibility was low, the icy water murky with drifting silt. The stillness of the fjord hid a lurking danger, one few would ever expect to encounter so far north. Greenland sharks, ancient predators that could grow to immense size, sometimes patrolled these waters. Slow but powerful, they had roamed the Arctic seas for centuries, unseen by most humans. As Lars swam out toward a shelf of floating ice, He felt the sting of cold press deeper into his muscles. He forced himself to stay steady, his strokes slow and practiced, his breath measured. Then, without warning, the water beneath him shifted. Out of the depths surged a massive shape, its bulk almost blending into the dark water until it was too close to avoid. The Greenland shark struck with sudden violence, its jaws clamping around his calf with crushing force. Pain shot through Lars as the predator twisted, dragging him sideways into the shadowed depths. He kicked wildly, his arms thrashing, fingernails scraping against jagged underwater ridges of ice. Blood poured into the water, swirling upward in thick clouds that mixed with the snow falling above. The predator rammed against him again, bumping and testing, each motion strong enough to shake his entire body. The cold became sharper as his body struggled against both pain and the icy current. Lars clawed at the slick edges of ice, his skin tearing as he tried to haul himself upward. The shark lunged again, smashing into his legs, splashing water in all directions. His limbs ached, his breath shortened, and the world seemed to blur into red and white. And then, almost as quickly as it had come, the predator released its grip. The shadow slipped back into the dark layers below, leaving the surface eerily calm once more. With every ounce of strength left, Lars pulled himself onto the icy platform, bruised and bleeding, gasping in the frigid air as the fjord closed behind him. The icy platform beneath Lars felt both like salvation and a trap. He lay sprawled across its slick surface, every breath ragged, the freezing air cutting his throat as much as the water had numbed his skin. His calf burned with unbearable pain, blood still seeping from deep wounds that stained the white ice crimson. His body shook uncontrollably, not only from the cold but from the shock of what had just happened. The fjord around him looked almost peaceful again, but beneath that calm lay the memory of the predator's strength, its shadow already vanishing into the endless dark below. With trembling hands, Lars pressed against his injury, desperate to slow the bleeding. The bite marks were jagged, the edges torn where the shark's teeth had pierced through muscle and skin. He felt weak, but his mind fought to stay focused. Each second on the ice was a struggle against both the freezing air and the loss of blood. He knew that survival now depended on endurance, not strength. Minutes stretched as he lay there, listening only to the sound of water lapping against the edges of the platform and the faint echo of gulls circling above. The fjord, once a place of challenge and beauty, had turned into a silent reminder of how small humans were in such a wild environment. His body wanted to rest, to give in, but he forced his eyes open, knowing that slipping into unconsciousness in this cold would mean the end. At last, faint voices carried across the water. A pair of fishermen steering their small boat near the fjord had spotted the motionless figure lying on the ice. Their craft drew closer, and soon rough hands hauled him into safety, wrapping him in thick coats to fight the chill. The boat's engine roared as they sped toward the nearest harbor, leaving behind the blood-stained floe where the attack had unfolded. On shore, medical crews rushed to stabilize him. His body was weak, his skin pale, and every movement sent sharp jolts of pain through his leg. Bandages wrapped tightly around the wounds, and warm blankets covered his shaking frame. The cold had pressed him to the edge, but he was alive. The shark had released him before the struggle had gone too far, though the scars would remain long after the blood dried. News of the encounter quickly spread throughout the region. Locals spoke with disbelief, many of whom were unaware that Greenland sharks even ventured so close to swimmers. Experts later explained that these ancient predators, often unseen and slow, could still strike with unexpected power when curious or provoked. The idea unsettled many, for if even the frozen fjords could harbor such danger, then no corner of the sea was truly predictable. For Lars, the experience marked more than an injury. It became a moment that split his life into two parts: the time before the bite and everything that followed. Each scar across his leg told of the sudden violence of that day, of survival torn from the jaws of an animal older than history itself. The fjord returned to silence in the days that followed, but for him, its calm surface would always hide the memory of the shadow that rose from the depths. On August 12, 2015, the waters off the coast of Japan shimmered with streaks of bioluminescence as night descended. Among the small cluster of divers preparing for research, Hiroshi Tanaka stood out as the most seasoned of them all. At 39, he had built a reputation as a skilled marine biologist, dedicating his career to documenting rare aquatic life. His fascination with deep-sea creatures began in his youth, when he often wandered the shores near his hometown, collecting shells and jotting down notes about fish. By adulthood, his work had taken him across oceans, but this night held a unique purpose. Hiroshi hoped to catch sight of elusive plankton blooms and study their interaction with marine species that surfaced only under the cover of darkness. The dive team worked in silence as their lights cut across the Black Sea, illuminating clouds of glowing organisms drifting like stars in liquid space. Hiroshi descended further, mesmerized by the way the plankton lit up with every kick of his fins. His equipment was secure, his senses alert, and his attention fixed on documenting the surreal display. Few experiences could match the sight of blue sparks glittering through still water, surrounding the divers in shifting curtains of light. For Hiroshi, this was more than research. It was a chance to understand how life thrived in the ocean's hidden layers. He carried his notes in waterproof casings, along with small instruments designed to measure plankton concentration. Each reading added to his years of careful study, but he also carried the awareness that the dark sea often concealed more than it revealed. From the depths below, a disturbance began to rise. At first, it felt like nothing more than a shift in current, but then an immense silhouette loomed from the black. Slowly, and with silent power, a megamouth shark emerged. This giant was rarely seen, its bulbous head and cavernous mouth dwarfing the divers around it. The shark drifted closer with eerie calm, its massive form dwarfing Hiroshi as it turned toward one of the floating pieces of equipment. With shocking force, the predator lunged. Its wide mouth snapped around the gear, and in that instant, Hiroshi was pulled along with it. His body dragged into the surge of water the shark displaced. The current slammed him sideways against jagged rock formations, coral scraping across his arms and legs as he fought to regain control. Teeth grazed his wetsuit, tugging at the fabric, a chilling reminder of how close he was to being swallowed whole. Bioluminescent plankton exploded in flashes of blue light, swirling into chaotic patterns that illuminated the thrashing scene. Each violent motion stirred clouds of debris that blinded him, and each roll of the shark's body sent him tumbling toward the reef below. The confined space of the underwater terrain left him little room to maneuver, every kick of his fins bringing the risk of another collision with stone. The megamouth circled again, nudging him with its massive head and twisting with surprising bursts of strength. Each pass forced Hiroshi to scramble, pushing away from rocks, lungs burning with effort as he tried to steady himself. Minutes stretched unbearably, every moment filled with the terror of another strike. The giant predator moved with unpredictable power, keeping him locked in a struggle that felt endless as the reef glowed faintly under the swirls of disturbed plankton. The immense shape moved with heavy precision, circling once more before turning toward deeper water. Its wide mouth opened and closed slowly, filtering through drifting organisms as if the violent outburst had been nothing more than an interruption of its steady feeding. Hiroshi floated in the middle of the turbulence it left behind, chest heaving as he steadied himself against the chaotic water. His limbs shook from exhaustion, scrapes burning from coral cuts, and his suit carried deep grazes where rough edges and grazing teeth had torn into the material. The bioluminescent plankton still shimmered faintly, glowing around him like fractured starlight, a reminder of how quickly beauty had been overtaken by raw survival. Gradually, the water settled. The debris stirred by the thrashing giant drifted downward, forming small clouds along the rocky ridges of the reef. Hiroshi turned slowly, scanning with his light for any sign of the predator's return. For long minutes, the only movement was the faint flicker of fish darting cautiously back into open water. The absence of the massive shark did little to calm the pounding in his chest, but instinct told him to begin ascending toward safety. He adjusted his breathing, pushing upward while keeping his eyes on the dark stretches below, every shadow a possible shape. When he reached the surface, the air felt sharp and heavy. The dive boat's lights glimmered nearby, and fellow researchers leaned anxiously over the edge as he approached. They pulled him aboard quickly, noting the torn gear, the bruises on his chest and the streaks of blood where coral had scraped his skin raw. Though shaken, Hiroshi remained conscious, his mind racing with a mix of relief and disbelief at what had just happened. Medical kits were brought forward, and an antiseptic solution was applied across his wounds as bandages were pressed firmly in place. The cuts were not life-threatening, but the bruises and abrasions along his body showed the full strength of the encounter. Each mark told of the force that had slammed him into rocks, of the moment when teeth had skimmed his suit, and of the seconds when the predator's head had shoved him through churning debris. Word of the event spread quickly among the scientific community. Megamouth sharks were rare, often elusive, and were known more for their passive feeding behavior than for direct contact with divers. Yet here was a documented encounter where the massive creature had turned violent, disturbing not only equipment but nearly claiming a researcher in the process. Experts debated whether the animal had mistaken the gear for food or whether the confined reef space had amplified its behavior. For Hiroshi, the aftermath was marked by both fear and fascination. His notes and damaged instruments became valuable records, proof of a meeting with one of the ocean's rarest predators under extraordinary conditions. But alongside the data came scars and memories that would linger. Every scrape, every bruise, every tear in his wetsuit was a reminder of how quickly calm could shatter in the ocean's depths. The dive that had begun as a study of glowing plankton ended as a struggle for survival. What was once a surreal and peaceful scene became an unpredictable battle. And even as he healed, Hiroshi knew the memory would never leave him. The glowing flashes of disturbed plankton and the silent power of the megamouth's bulk would forever remain etched in his mind, a lasting warning of the sea's hidden and untamed strength. On February 8, 2025, the sun glared over warm waters off KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. Liam Carter, 26, lived for thrills. Raised near the coast, he felt the ocean in his bones and gravitated to fast-paced sports. Jet skis were his obsession, the speed, spray, and roar delivering freedom he craved. By day, he worked in event management. Off the clock, the water called. Whenever time allowed, he was out there, surfing dawn breaks, freediving the reefs, or carving crescents across the sea on his ski. Friends knew him as fearless, meticulous with gear, and happiest when sea wind stung his face. That morning, he had decided to take his jet ski out alone, enjoying the wide open stretch of ocean. The waves were moderate, rolling enough to give him lifts and drops that added to the thrill of his ride. Seabirds glided overhead, and from the shore, distant figures of surfers could be seen preparing to paddle out. Liam revved the engine and darted across the swells, each movement leaving trails of foam behind him. He leaned into the curves, heart racing with the adrenaline of speed. Beneath the surface, however, another form was moving swiftly. A short-fin mako, sleek and built for explosive bursts, had been drawn closer by the vibrations of the racing engine and the spray. Known as one of the fastest and most aggressive predators in the sea, the shark closed in with precision, its large eyes fixed on the source of disturbance. The surface above did not indicate what was to come. As Liam powered forward, the water erupted without warning. The predator surged upward, slamming with brutal force into the side of his jet ski. The machine lurched violently, tipping sideways and throwing Liam into the water. He struck the surface hard, air bursting from his lungs as the heavy craft flipped beside him. The shock left him disoriented, his head breaking the surface only long enough to take a breath before the next strike came. The mako lunged again with terrifying speed, its jaws clamped onto his right arm, teeth slicing through flesh and muscle in a devastating grip. Pain shot through him as blood erupted into the water. In one violent motion, nearly half his arm was torn away, leaving him gasping in shock and agony. He kicked and twisted desperately, trying to fight free, but the shark circled, ramming and snapping with each pass. Foam, spray, and fragments from the overturned jet ski floated around him, the chaos of the scene turning the ocean into a storm of red-stained waves and debris. Each second stretched into eternity as he tried to stay afloat, his strength weakening from blood loss while the predator continued its relentless testing. Surfers and a nearby rescue vessel noticed the commotion and rushed toward him, their movements urgent as the predator circled once more. Just as the boat neared, the mako launched forward again, its jaws snapping only feet away from Liam's battered body. The rescue crew reached Liam in the final instant, pulling him over the side of their boat as the predator veered away into deeper water. His body was bruised and torn, the wound on his arm severe, blood still spilling into the waves below. The water around them calmed again, but the scene was marked by floating debris and the overturned machine that bobbed helplessly in the swell. The predator had disappeared as swiftly as it had come, leaving only silence and shock in its wake. On board, helpers pressed cloth and bandages to what was left of his arm, working against the steady flow of blood. His skin was pale, lips trembling as he fought to remain conscious, breaths shallow but determined. The boat surged back toward shore, engines straining as every minute grew heavier with urgency. Surfers who had seen the event trailed behind, shaken by the violence of the strike, their own boards rocking uneasily on the water's surface. When they reached the beach, paramedics were waiting for them. Liam was lifted onto a stretcher, his body trembling under the weight of shock and blood loss. The wound was bound tighter, fluids connected, voices hurried and firm. His eyes opened weakly, fear and pain clear, but he clung to the effort of survival as he was carried toward the ambulance. News of the attack spread quickly through the community. People along the coastline gathered in stunned silence, their faces pale as they watched the emergency vehicles speed away. The ocean, which had moments before echoed with laughter and thrill, was now a place marked by dread, its beauty overshadowed by the raw reminder of danger. Experts later confirmed the strike as typical of a short-fin mako, drawn by speed and commotion. locals were reminded that even the most skilled swimmers and riders were vulnerable when predators moved close to shore. Liam's survival depended on the quick action of those nearby, though the injury would leave him forever changed. The waves settled again, but for those who had witnessed it, the memory of that day would remain etched in their minds, a sharp warning of the thin line between adventure and disaster. On March 22, 2025, Petty Officer James Carver, known to his crew as Jimmy, prepared for what seemed like a routine naval diving exercise off the coast of Darwin, Australia. At 32 years old, Jimmy was an experienced diver, part of an elite underwater operations unit responsible for testing navigation and safety protocols in challenging marine environments. His calm nature and steady focus had earned him deep respect among his peers. His years in the Navy had shaped him into a man who trusted discipline, skill, and training more than luck. The sea was his second home, a place he respected, never feared. That morning, as the team assembled their gear under the bright tropical sun, there was no sign that this day would be any different from the many they had done before. The ocean stretched endlessly around them, calm and inviting. Once submerged, the divers descended in perfect formation, following compass routes through open blue water. The visibility was excellent. Sunlight streamed down through the surface, illuminating the sandy bottom far below. The rhythm of breathing through the rebreather was steady, and the communication signals between team members flowed smoothly. For nearly 20 minutes, everything went exactly to plan. The team adjusted depths, tracked bearings, and practiced emergency drills, their focus sharp and unbroken. Then the ocean changed. It was subtle at first, and a quiet shift in the water's mood. Small fish darted away in bursts, and a faint shadow moved across the edge of visibility. The divers slowed their movements instinctively. Out of the haze ahead, a massive tiger shark emerged, gliding with deliberate grace. It measured over 4 meters long, its stripes faint but clear against the deep blue. The team tightened formation, maintaining calm as they had trained for encounters like this before. But there was something different about this predator. It did not turn away. Instead, it circled them slowly, each pass bringing it closer. Jimmy held his ground, steady and alert. The shark's broad head tilted slightly, its dark eyes locked on his movement. Then, without warning, it surged forward in a blur of motion. In a single, explosive strike, its jaws clamped onto the back of his rebreather pack, shaking him violently. The force drove him downward, the world spinning in a rush of bubbles and water. The creature's tail thrashed with brutal power, pulling him deeper as he fought to free himself. Training kicked in. Jimmy reached for his dive knife, twisting his body with precision despite the chaos. As the shark dragged him into a spiral, he plunged the blade into the sensitive slit behind its gills. The reaction was instant, a powerful jerk as the predator released its grip. But not before its teeth tore through his shoulder, slicing through his wetsuit and flesh. Pain exploded through his arm, but survival instincts kept him moving. He tried to stabilize his position, but the bleeding wound drew the predator back. His vision blurred for a moment as he saw the shadow circling again, faster now. Before the shark could strike once more, 2 Navy safety divers rushed in from above, deploying acoustic deterrents that pulsed through the water with sharp frequencies. The predator flinched, veering away into the depths, its striped body fading into the blue void. The rescuers grabbed Jimmy, securing him with harness straps as they began their ascent. Blood clouded the water, swirling upward as they climbed toward the light. Each second felt endless as the sea churned around them, the silence broken only by the muffled hum of their equipment. As Jimmy and his rescuers neared the surface, the sunlight shimmered faintly through the water, a blurred promise of safety above the chaos. Every movement sent fresh pain through his shoulder, the torn muscle throbbing with each beat of his heart. Blood drifted in thin streams behind him, carried away by the gentle current. The safety divers held him firm, their ascent controlled, careful not to trigger another appearance from the vanished predator. When they finally broke through the surface, the calm sea seemed almost unreal, too peaceful after the violence below. The rescue vessel raced toward them, engines roaring as crew members leaned over the side, ready to pull him aboard. The divers guided Jimmy to the ladder, helping him up while medics rushed to his aid. His wetsuit was shredded across the upper torso, revealing a deep wound that ran from shoulder to chest. The team worked quickly, pressing bandages to slow the bleeding as his breathing came in short, uneven gasps. He stayed conscious, though pale and trembling from shock. Within minutes, the boat sped toward the nearest naval medical facility, cutting through the waves at full power. The atmosphere was tense but efficient. Every member of the crew knew how serious the situation was, yet no one panicked. Inside the small cabin, medical officers worked to stabilize Jimmy, keeping pressure on the wound and monitoring his pulse. The deep punctures and tissue damage were severe, but his heart remained steady. By the time they reached the dock, emergency teams were waiting. Stretchers, oxygen, and surgical staff were already in place. Jimmy was transferred directly into an ambulance and rushed into surgery. For 4 hours, doctors repaired torn muscle and stitched the jagged cuts left by the shark's teeth. The damage was extensive, but the quick response had saved his life. After the operation, he was moved to intensive care, where the rhythmic beeping of machines replaced the sounds of the ocean that had nearly taken him. The news of the incident spread quickly through the naval base. Reports of the attack reached higher command, triggering an immediate investigation. The tiger shark encounter shocked even veteran divers who had trained in dangerous waters for years. Safety officers reviewed equipment, procedures, and deterrent systems, determined to understand how the animal had gotten so close. For days, divers and instructors met to analyze footage from the training dive, adjusting tactics and introducing new sonar-based early detection systems. Meanwhile, Jimmy's recovery was slow but steady. The physical pain lessened with time, but the mental images stayed clear in his mind. The sudden rush of movement, the crushing bite, the swirling blue darkness. Yet he refused to let fear define him. Visitors often found him sitting upright in the hospital bed, watching the sea beyond the window with quiet determination. 2 weeks later, he was released from intensive care, his arm wrapped in thick bandages, his body weak but healing. The Navy recognized his composure and skill during the crisis, calling him an example of discipline under threat. His ordeal became a reminder that even the most trained professionals faced limits when nature's power turned unpredictable. In the months that followed, new safety regulations were added to every training program, including mandatory predator awareness briefings and the use of additional acoustic repellents during open water missions. The event marked a turning point in how the Navy prepared its divers. Jimmy's scar would remain, a lasting trace of survival beneath the waves, a silent mark of a moment when human strength met nature's ferocity and endured. September 3, 2019, the early light over Cottesloe Beach shimmered across the calm water, casting a golden hue on the surface. It was the kind of morning that 24-year-old Maya Roberts loved most. Born and raised in Perth, Maya had grown up beside the sea. From childhood, she had always been drawn to the waves, swimming before school, surfing with friends on weekends, and spending her free hours training in the open water. Her parents often watched with pride as she glided effortlessly through the surf, her movements sharp and steady, her focus unbroken. She had the discipline of a true athlete, and by her early 20s, she was training to compete in her first Ironman triathlon. Maya's dedication was unmatched. Each dawn, she followed a strict routine, tracking distance and timing every lap. For her, the ocean was both a challenge and comfort, a vast field where she could push herself beyond limits. The waters off Cottesloe had become her favorite training ground, familiar yet unpredictable. Locals knew that these same waters were home to juvenile great whites, often seen following schools of fish or seals near the shore. Warnings were frequent, but for swimmers like Maya, the risk had long been part of the sport. That September morning was clear and calm. The beach was nearly empty except for a few joggers and early risers. Maya adjusted her goggles, checked her watch, and entered the cool water. Her goal was simple: a 2-kilometer swim along the coast, just another step in her preparation for the upcoming competition. As she moved farther from shore, her strokes were strong and rhythmic, each breath even and deliberate. About 800 meters out, the world around her was quiet except for the gentle slosh of water against her wetsuit. Below, the ocean floor fell away into deeper blue. Visibility was fair, sunlight piercing through in soft, shifting beams. Unbeknownst to her, something large was gliding through the depths, silent, patient, and curious. Moments later, a sudden disturbance rippled across the surface. From the shore, 2 witnesses noticed a strange splash far beyond the swim markers. What had been a smooth pattern of movement broke into violent thrashing. For a few seconds, it was chaos. Water churning, white spray shooting upward, then sudden stillness. The sea returned to calm as if nothing had happened. Beneath the surface, the predator had struck with staggering speed. The great white, estimated to be 4.5 meters long, surged from below in a powerful burst. Its jaws closed around its target with crushing force. the impact instant and decisive. The sudden attack left no chance for escape or defense. The force tore through the water, scattering bubbles and debris in all directions. Within moments, the ocean swallowed the struggle, leaving behind only faint ripples and drifting fragments. Back on shore, people stared in confusion, trying to make sense of what they had just seen. Rescue teams were alerted immediately, and boats were dispatched within minutes to the coordinates where Maya had last been spotted. They combed the area for hours, searching for any trace in the vast expanse of blue. As the sun rose higher, only fragments began to surface. A torn piece of neoprene, a single flipper floating aimlessly. Hope began to fade as the rescue turned into a recovery effort. The calm water now carried the weight of loss, and whispers of disbelief spread across the beach. Boats moved slowly across the open water as search teams continued their efforts, scanning every ripple and shadow. Divers entered the sea in pairs, their lines cutting through the surface as they descended into the silent depths. Hours passed with no sound except the hum of engines and the soft lapping of waves. What had begun as a calm morning had turned into a scene of disbelief and sorrow. The ocean that once seemed peaceful now felt heavy, filled with a quiet sense of danger. By late afternoon, officials confirmed the worst. Only fragments of Maya's wetsuit and a single flipper were recovered, torn and frayed. The condition of the materials suggested a violent struggle and an immense force. Experts analyzed the marks found along the neoprene, concluding they were consistent with the bite of a large great white shark, estimated to be around 4.5 meters long. It had likely approached unseen from deeper water, using the still morning light to its advantage. News of the tragedy spread quickly through Perth and across Western Australia. Maya's family and friends gathered on the beach as the sun set. The shoreline quiet, except for the sound of waves breaking softly against the sand. Flowers were placed near her usual entry point into the water, the spot where she had begun her final swim. For those who knew her, the loss was almost unreal. She had trained for years, disciplined and careful, yet a few seconds had changed everything. In the days that followed, the beach was temporarily closed while marine patrols monitored for shark activity. Helicopters flew overhead, scanning for movement in the shallows, while experts reviewed data from nearby tracking buoys. The event reignited a long-standing debate in Australia about human presence in the territory of marine predators. Many questioned whether enough precautions were being taken as more people entered the ocean for sport and recreation. Marine biologists explained that September marked the seasonal period when juvenile great whites often roamed closer to the coast in search of prey. While attacks were rare, the overlap between swimmers and these powerful predators was increasing. The sea, they said, remained an environment ruled by instinct and survival, where even experienced athletes were vulnerable. For weeks after the incident, people continued to visit Cottesloe Beach, standing quietly by the waterline. Maya's story became a reminder of both courage and fragility. She had devoted her life to strength and endurance, yet nature had reminded everyone how small humans could be in comparison to the vastness of the ocean. A memorial swim was held 1 month later, where dozens of athletes entered the water together, tracing the same route she had once trained along. They swam in silence beneath a clear sky, surrounded by lifeguards and boats, honoring the memory of someone who had lived her life in motion and met the sea without fear. The event left a lasting impact on the community and sparked further safety initiatives along the coast. Drone surveillance, warning systems, and increased awareness programs were introduced in her name. Even so, every swimmer who looked out at the endless horizon knew what the sea could hold: beauty, challenge, and sometimes danger beyond control. On October 3, 2021, 42-year-old David Lang stood on the upper deck of a Pacific cruise liner, cutting through rough seas. He was a travel photographer from New Zealand, known for chasing dramatic weather and capturing the moods of the ocean. Years of work had taken him to distant coasts, from icy fjords to coral lagoons, but the Pacific always felt like home. This trip was meant to be both work and escape, a chance to gather new material while taking a quiet break after months of back-to-back assignments. The storm that morning had rolled in faster than expected, thick clouds swallowing the horizon as rain fell in heavy sheets. Most passengers had already taken shelter below, leaving the deck empty except for David, his camera gear, and the restless wind. He moved carefully along the slick rail, trying to photograph lightning striking far across the dark sea. Waves crashed against the hull, their spray mixing with rain. Then, without warning, the ship lurched sharply. The deck tilted and his foot slipped on the wet surface. In a split second, the world turned upside down. He hit the railing, tried to grab hold, but the force of the storm wrenched him free. His body plunged into the black water below, swallowed instantly by the churning sea. The cold shock took his breath away. Rain hammered the surface and the ship's lights blurred into the distance as the massive liner continued its course, unaware of the man who had vanished into the storm. Panic struck first, followed by raw instinct. David kicked upward, breaking through the surface, gasping for air. The waves tossed him violently, pulling him under and throwing him back up again. He saw flashes of debris drifting in the water, pieces swept overboard by the storm. Among them floated a white plastic cooler, its lid half broken but still buoyant. He clung to it desperately, using it to keep himself afloat, as the ship's faint glow disappeared into the distance. Minutes turned into an hour. The rain eased slightly, but the darkness remained heavy. The storm clouds began to thin, revealing an endless stretch of open sea around him. Every muscle in his body ached from the struggle. He tried to stay calm, floating and breathing steadily. But soon something changed beneath him. The water grew unnaturally still and faint shadows began to move below the surface. Two sleek fins appeared, slicing through the water with deliberate grace. Oceanic white-tip sharks, bold and persistent hunters of the open sea. At first they only circled. Their pale tips shimmered in the faint light as they moved closer, drawn by the scent of blood from a scrape on his leg and the distant remains of debris drifting nearby. One brushed against him, its rough skin scraping his calf. Then came the first test, a sudden nip, quick but sharp, tearing through the outer layer of skin. David's pulse surged. He kicked out hard, splashing and twisting to drive them away. The cooler rocked beneath him, nearly slipping from his grasp. The predators regrouped, circling again, slower this time, studying their prey. The open sea around him was silent except for his splashing and the faint hiss of wind. Each second felt longer than the last as the fins cut closer once more, and David prepared himself for whatever came next. The sharks moved closer, their movement slow and sure, circling the man and the cooler like silent hunters in command of the sea. The water rippled with every pass, each glide bringing them nearer. David's arms trembled from holding on, but he refused to let go. His legs kicked weakly, sending bursts of foam that momentarily kept the predators at a distance. One brushed its snout against the cooler, testing it, while another slid beneath him, vanishing into the deep before rising again in a slow arc. The cold salt water stung his wounds, and his body shook with exhaustion. The endless blue around him felt alive, filled with unseen danger waiting just below. Time dragged, his thoughts blurred between fear and hope. The horizon stretched empty in all directions, no sound but the gentle slap of waves and the faint swirl of fins. His mind fought the heavy pull of fatigue as he struggled to keep his grip. The cooler creaked and rocked, half submerged from his weight. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the sharks began to lose interest. One made a final pass, brushing his ankle before turning away. The shapes faded into the depths, leaving the sea eerily calm once more. Moments later, a distant thumping noise broke the silence. The faint rhythm grew louder until a helicopter came into view, circling above the waves. A spotlight cut through the gloom, sweeping across the surface until it caught the sight of a man clinging to a white object. A rescue cable dropped through the mist, and within minutes, David was lifted clear of the water, body limp from exhaustion, but still breathing. When they reached the ship's medical bay, crew members treated the deep scrapes and bruises along his legs and arms. Though his injuries were minor, the shock had left him pale and trembling. In the days that followed, he often sat silently by the window, staring out at the ocean that had nearly taken his life. The storm, the fall, and the circling shadows had shown him the thin line between safety and danger, between life and what waits beneath the waves. On July 14, 2021, Daniel Ruiz, a 32-year-old adventure lover from Miami, woke early with one goal in mind: to capture a thrilling photo that would go viral online. Known among his friends for his fearless nature and love for fast machines, Daniel often spent weekends chasing excitement. From skydiving to cliff jumping, he lived for moments that made his heart race. His latest obsession was jet skiing, and he had recently bought a bright red watercraft to explore Florida's coastlines. He enjoyed the rush of speeding over waves and had grown confident enough to attempt daring stunts for social media. That morning, the sky was clear, the water calm, and Daniel saw the perfect chance to make his next big post. He and two friends headed toward a mangrove channel near Miami, a spot popular with tourists and local thrill seekers. Warning signs along the docks cautioned against entering certain shallow zones due to shark activity, but Daniel barely noticed. He had read stories of people capturing breathtaking photos while balancing on their jet skis, and he wanted one of his own. With the sun shining and his phone secured in a waterproof case, he powered up the jet ski and roared into the open water. At first, everything seemed perfect. The waves shimmered under the morning light, and the air was filled with the hum of the engine. Daniel raced across the surface, carving turns and splashing through shallow water near the mangroves. His friends watched from a nearby craft, filming him with their phones. Each pass became bolder, the engine louder, the splashes higher. He leaned closer to the water, extending his arm to capture the right angle. The moment felt effortless, and adrenaline surged through him as he lined up the shot he had been imagining all morning. Then, without warning, the jet ski jolted violently. The front end dipped as if it had been caught by something beneath the surface. Daniel lost balance instantly and tumbled headfirst into the water. His phone spun out of his hand, vanishing below. For a split second, his friends laughed, thinking it was part of the act. But then the ocean surface broke apart around him in an explosion of foam and water. A massive shape surged upward, cutting through the waves. A 3.3-meter bull shark, drawn by the splashing and engine noise, struck with astonishing speed. It slammed into Daniel's leg with brutal force, teeth sinking deep into flesh. The impact sent shockwaves through his body. He kicked and thrashed, his scream echoing across the channel. Blood spread through the clear water in a red cloud as the predator shook him from side to side, testing its hold. Panic gripped everyone watching. Daniel tried to push away, grabbing at the side of his overturned jet ski. The shark circled again, its dorsal fin slicing through the surface. He could feel the water vibrating with each turn as the creature passed close enough for its rough skin to brush against his arm. The mangroves swayed nearby, silent witnesses to the chaos. His friends sped toward him, their engines roaring as they closed the distance. Daniel's strength was fading. His leg was torn and bleeding heavily. The predator lunged once more, bumping the jet ski's hull before slipping beneath the waves again. The friends reached him just in time, stretching their arms to haul him from the water. His body was trembling, the salt water stinging his wounds. The sea that had seemed calm minutes earlier now churned with fear and foam as the shark's dark shadow disappeared into the depths below. As Daniel's friends pulled him onto the second jet ski, the full extent of his injuries became clear. His leg was torn deeply from the bite, muscle and skin shredded where the shark's jaws had clamped down. Salt water mixed with blood running down the side of the craft as they held him steady. His face was pale, his breathing shallow, and his body shivered from shock. Every wave hit the side of the jet ski, rocking it gently, while the mangrove channel around them remained eerily silent. The once clear water was now streaked with faint trails of red that slowly spread outward. The men acted fast, using a towel to tie a makeshift bandage around the wound to slow the bleeding. One of them steered the jet ski toward shore at full speed, while the other kept pressure on Daniel's leg. The trip back felt endless, the minutes stretching as the engine roared through the still air. Behind them, the water rippled occasionally, as if something large moved beneath the surface, but the shark did not return. The mangroves faded into the distance as they approached the dock, where several people were already gathering, alerted by the noise and the distant cries for help. When they reached land, hands reached out to help lift Daniel from the craft. The dock became a blur of motion as bystanders rushed to bring towels, belts, and first aid kits. Someone called for emergency services while others tried to keep him conscious. His eyes fluttered as pain pulsed through his body, and his hands gripped the dock boards weakly. The sound of the sirens grew louder, breaking through the quiet hum of the harbor. Paramedics rushed in, cutting through the towels to assess the wound, then lifted him onto a stretcher. Within minutes, he was inside the ambulance, racing toward the nearest trauma center in Miami. Doctors worked quickly once he arrived. The bite had torn through tissue and exposed bone, but his arteries were intact. Hours of surgery followed, as teams cleaned and repaired the wound, carefully removing damaged muscle and sealing the deep gashes. He survived, but the attack left lasting scars, both physical and emotional. The leg would take months to heal, and some damage would remain permanent. The story spread rapidly through local news and social media, shocking many who had seen Daniel's previous videos online. Experts explained that the noise and splashing from jet skis often attract sharks, especially bull sharks, which are known to investigate disturbances in shallow water. They said the movement of his arm while taking photos might have looked like a struggling fish to the predator. The warnings that had been ignored now carried a grim new meaning. In the weeks that followed, Daniel's photo from that day, the one he had been trying to take, was never found, lost somewhere beneath the waves. However, his story spread far, shared as a cautionary lesson about how easily risk can turn into danger. Beaches near the mangrove channels began posting new signs with bright red lettering, reminding riders to avoid feeding or attracting wildlife in those zones. Months later, Daniel returned to the water, though never alone. The scar along his leg remained, a reminder of the day when a simple thrill turned into a fight for life. The sea still shimmered beautifully under the sun, but he viewed it differently now, as a place that demanded respect, not spectacle. On October 1, 2025, the Laurent family, travelers from southern France with a love for adventure, arrived at the busy harbor of Gansbaai, South Africa, their hearts pounding with anticipation as they prepared to experience what they had long considered the pinnacle of oceanic thrill: cage diving with great white sharks. Julien Laurent, 45, a marine biologist who had spent his life studying ocean predators but had never confronted one at such close quarters, had convinced his wife Camille, 43, a literature teacher with an innate respect for the sea, and their 17-year-old daughter Elodie, who had inherited her father's curiosity about marine life, that the experience would be exhilarating yet completely safe under the supervision of the seasoned crew. The morning air smelled sharply of salt and diesel, seagulls wheeling overhead as the small expedition boat rocked on the swell, sunlight glinting on choppy waves that sparkled deceptively, hiding the raw power beneath. They had prepared carefully, wetsuits adjusted snugly, regulators checked twice, masks sealed, and cages reinforced with steel bars that had survived countless encounters. The crew moved with precise efficiency, dumping chum into the sea which churned into a frothy swirl, creating a lure irresistible to the massive predators lurking below. Julien, Camille, and Elodie stepped into the cage, the doors closing securely behind them, as the boat rocked gently and the distant cries of the crew punctuated the tense silence. At first, the water was calm, shadows drifting in the blue, the occasional swirl hinting at something far larger than anything the family could see. Julien watched his own breath form clouds in the cold water, feeling the reassuring solidity of the steel cage beneath his hands, while Camille's fingers tightened around the bars, a nervous habit she could not suppress. Elodie's gaze darted across the shadows, excitement and fear mingling as adrenaline began its quiet surge through her veins. The ocean stretched out into endless mystery around them, promising both awe and danger. Then, without warning, the sea erupted. From the depths, a massive great white, estimated at 5.5 meters, shot upward with terrifying speed, its bulk carving through the water, seemingly born for this very moment. The cage lurched violently under the force, a deafening crack echoing as seawater cascaded over them in sheets, blinding and relentless. Julien felt the steel shift beneath him, the bars groaning, and adrenaline flooded his senses as instinct and parental protection collided. He shoved Elodie toward a corner, pressing her as close as possible against the cage, while bracing himself against the immense impact. The shark's head, wider than any fish he had seen even in research, found a warped gap in the bars, and its jaws clamped down on Julien's forearm with a force that stole his breath and sent shockwaves of pain up his body. Camille, caught by the predator's tail, was thrown against the cage wall with bone-jarring force, winded and disoriented, her body slick with seawater and already streaked with blood from shallow cuts. Elodie's eyes widened behind her mask, a scream trapped in the regulator as terror rooted her to the spot, watching her parents struggle to repel the massive animal that seemed impossibly powerful and impossibly close. Above, the crew fought to haul them out, pulling ropes and activating safety mechanisms with desperate efficiency, every second stretching into an eternity as the shark circled the cage, jaws snapping and waiting for another opportunity to strike. Julien twisted and braced himself, each movement an intense battle of strength and pain, while Camille tried to orient herself, raising her arms to shield her head from the turbulent water. The predator turned the once safe cage into a deadly arena, where survival hinged on instinct and quick thinking. The assault escalated, the great white thrashing with terrifying energy, its body colliding against the steel with each impact, shaking the cage and reverberating through the water, a reminder that nature's power was both raw and uncompromising. Julien wedged himself between Elodie and the gap, teeth gritted as pain radiated from his mangled arm, while Camille, though dazed and battered, pressed back, fighting for breath and balance as the predator swirled violently around them. The crew finally gained leverage to lift the cage partially out of the water, creating a brief barrier that forced the shark to retreat, disappearing into the deep with a swirl of bubbles and a last lingering threat that left the family trembling and soaked, their hearts racing in unison. When the immediate danger passed, the family was hoisted aboard the boat, bodies trembling, hearts hammering, and limbs shaking from shock and exertion, each marked by cuts, bruises, and the raw memory of the encounter. The deck was slick with seawater and blood. The medics on board quickly assessed injuries. Julian's forearm was torn, muscles shredded and skin ripped. Camille bore welts and abrasions along her side, while Elodie, though miraculously spared severe physical harm, carried the invisible weight of trauma in wide, haunted eyes that refused to blink away the horror she had witnessed. The crew worked methodically, applying first aid and stabilizing the wounded as the boat sped toward the harbor. The family leaned on one another, bound by shock and relief, silently acknowledging the brutal unpredictability of the ocean and the sheer might of the creature they had dared to confront. Each moment of survival had hinged on timing, quick thinking, and unrelenting courage, and as adrenaline ebbed, exhaustion and lingering fear settled into every muscle, a tangible reminder of the day's peril. By the time they reached shore, the sun had begun to dip behind distant hills, casting long, shifting shadows over the harbor. Bloodied, shaken, but alive, Julien, Camille, and Elodie stepped onto solid ground, their hearts still racing and minds replaying each second of the encounter in vivid detail. The day forever etched in memory, as a brutal testament to nature's dominance, and a stark reminder that even carefully planned adventures can transform into nightmares in the blink of an eye. For the Laurent family, what had been a dream of close-up wonder became an unforgettable confrontation with raw, untamed power, leaving them marked not only by injury, but by the knowledge that survival is fragile, fleeting, and earned only through courage, presence of mind, and the unbreakable bonds of family when everything else is swept away. On March 18, 2017, the Royal Australian Coast Guard received an urgent alert from the Albany Maritime Dispatch Centre, reporting a small yacht adrift near a submerged reef off the rugged southwestern coast of Western Australia, its hull listing dangerously as waves pounded the rocky outcrop, raising immediate concerns of fuel leakage and potential environmental damage. Liam Foster, 32, a seasoned diver and rescue specialist with over a decade of experience in the treacherous waters of the Southern Ocean, was part of the three-person dive team tasked with inspecting the capsized vessel and mitigating hazards. Joined by fellow divers Marcus Hayes, 35, an engineer with years of dive rescue experience, and Daniel Reed, 29, a meticulous navigator and underwater surveyor whose calm demeanor often balanced the more impulsive tendencies of his teammates. The sky was gray and overcast, with winds gusting unpredictably as the team prepared to enter the choppy water. The sea below was turbulent, with currents that twisted around hidden rocks and coral heads, making even routine dives a calculated risk. The divers suited up quickly, checking their regulators, buoyancy devices, and emergency lines. Their movements were precise, having been honed through countless drills, yet tempered with a quiet tension born from the knowledge that the Southern Ocean could turn violent in seconds. The boat lurched beneath them, waves spilling over the rails as they approached the reef, and the scent of salt and diesel hung thick in the air, mingling with the faint tang of seaweed carried on the wind. Liam, confident in his skills but aware of the inherent dangers, took the lead, signaling to his teammates as they descended into the cold, murky depths, regulators filling their ears with the hiss of compressed air and water pressing against their suits. The world above reduced to muted light filtering down through the gray water. The initial inspection proceeded methodically. Liam's gloved hands brushed along the hull, checking for breaches and fuel leaks, while Marcus and Daniel hovered nearby, scanning the surrounding water for debris or shifting currents. The murk of the Southern Ocean limited visibility to a few meters, and every shadow seemed amplified, every flicker in the water a potential threat. The divers were aware of the possibility of large predators in these waters. Still, they trusted their training, believing that their team coordination and safety protocols would keep them out of harm's way during this standard operation. Then, without warning, the water exploded with sudden violence. From the gray murk below, a massive great white, estimated at 5.2 meters, surged upward with terrifying speed, its sheer bulk propelling it like a missile through the water. Liam was the first to feel the impact, a crushing force colliding against him from below, knocking the regulator from his mouth and leaving him coughing violently as water filled his airway. The diver was propelled backward into the swirl of bubbles and debris, his harness straining against the sudden pull as instinct and panic collided, adrenaline spiking in a way that left his mind focused entirely on survival in the face of overwhelming force. Before Marcus or Daniel could react, the shark struck again, clamping onto Liam's torso with a ferocious grip that sent shockwaves of pain radiating through his body, each movement of the predator throwing him violently in the current. Blood spread in a dark cloud through the water, the metallic scent mixing with the brine, as Liam fought to keep his regulator in place, only to feel it torn free once more, the life-sustaining air cutting off in a brutal instant. His emergency tether, designed to anchor him to the vessel and maintain team connection, snapped under the force of the spiral drag, leaving him isolated in the turbulent water. The world was reduced to chaotic motion, and the terrifying power of a predator moved with startling precision and speed. Marcus and Daniel lunged toward him, their hands gripping at the water, attempting to divert the shark's attention. Still, the predator, driven by instinct and curiosity, turned and attacked again, its massive jaws closing with bone-crushing force and tearing Liam free from the last point of restraint. Each thrash of the great white sent shockwaves through the surrounding water, displacing debris and sending the remaining divers spinning in currents they could neither anticipate nor control. The scene was a maelstrom of bubbles, blood, and the inescapable violence of nature unleashed. Above, the rescue boats strained their engines against the swell, the crews shouting over wind and waves, deploying ropes and poles in desperate attempts to reach the divers, their eyes scanning the dark water for any sign of survival. Minutes stretched interminably, each tick of the clock a reminder of the lethal power lurking beneath the surface. At the same time, Liam's body was swept away in the shark's relentless thrashing, fragments of harness and gear the only evidence of his struggle as he vanished from sight. Marcus and Daniel fought to maintain their own positions, battered by currents and terror, their lungs burning, hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and professional urgency, knowing that even a brief distraction could prove fatal in these waters. When the boats finally reached the last known location, the aftermath was stark. Only fragments of diving equipment remained, torn gloves, a regulator clipped to nothing, and sections of harness floating among the turbulent waves, blood seeping into the gray swell like ink in water. Liam's absence left an invisible void, the weight of his loss pressing on the surviving divers as they were pulled aboard, shivering and soaked, their minds struggling to process the sudden violent rupture of a mission that had begun with routine precision and confidence. Back on the harbor, the Coast Guard initiated a thorough review of the incident, confirming the presence of a massive great white in the area, but was unable to retrieve Liam's body. For his teammates, the experience remained indelibly etched in memory. The sudden eruption of power from the depths, the violent contact that tore equipment and threatened life, the cloud of blood spreading and distorting the water around them, and the moments of desperate effort to save one of their own before the unforgiving currents and predators claimed him entirely. The mission, intended to prevent environmental damage and maintain safety, had ended in tragedy, a sobering testament to the unpredictable dangers that even the most skilled and prepared rescuers face when confronting nature at its most raw and unyielding. Though seasoned divers Marcus and Daniel returned from that day changed, their understanding of the ocean's power had intensified, and the terror and skill displayed by the great white were a stark reminder that experience could never eliminate risk. That survival, even in the hands of experts, often depended on chance, timing, and the merciless randomness of predator and sea. Liam Foster, one of the coast's most respected rescuers, was lost to the deep, leaving behind a legacy of professionalism, courage, and an enduring reminder of the gulf between human preparation and the uncontainable force of nature that moves beneath the waves, unseen and indifferent to human ambition or effort. On August 17, 2024, the sun-drenched beaches of the Canary Islands were alive with the sounds of a summer festival, music booming, crowds cheering, and the smell of salt and grilled seafood mingling with the sharp tang of sunscreen and ocean spray. Among the scheduled events was a highly anticipated jet ski show, featuring daring stunts meant to thrill spectators along the golden sand. Luis Ortega, 26, a professional stunt rider with years of experience navigating waves and performing precision maneuvers, was the star of the finale, known for his fearless approach and technical skill. clad in a brightly colored wetsuit and armed with only his life vest and jet ski. He had spent the morning rehearsing jumps and spins, confident that the combination of timing, speed, and safety protocols would ensure a flawless performance. The crowd watched eagerly as Luis executed the final run of the show, weaving through buoys and arcs of spray, performing backflips and wheelies with practiced grace, the sun glinting off the water in a dazzling display. The finale called for him to leap from his ski into the sea, riding alongside the support boat as it sped toward deeper waters, a stunt meant to impress the audience with both daring and coordination. Luis accelerated, feeling the familiar rush of wind and salt spray, his eyes fixed on the marker where he was to hit the water safely. The roar of the crowd blended with the pounding surf, adrenaline coursing through every fiber of his body. But the execution faltered in the final moment. Instead of landing near the boat's protective hull, a slight miscalculation of speed and angle, combined with the uneven swell of the late afternoon sea, sent him splashing down far from the intended zone. His body plunged into water deeper and colder than anticipated, separated from both the craft and the buoyant safety devices meant to protect him. For a fleeting instant, the world was a blur of spray and sunlight, his limbs flailing instinctively as he tried to orient himself, aware that the support boat seemed further away than it should have been. The choppy water pushed him slightly beneath the surface with every passing wave. From the depths below, movement caught the eye of a predator. A 3-meter shortfin mako, fast, streamlined, and driven by instinct, surged upward at incredible speed, drawn to the commotion and the frantic splashes that resembled struggling prey. In a single explosive motion, it collided with Luis's side, teeth sinking deeply into his upper arm and spinning him violently in the water, the force of the impact sending shockwaves through his body. Blood erupted around him, crimson spreading in the clear blue, twisting and churning in eddies that reflected both the sunlight and the sheer violence of the attack. Pain radiated in every direction, muscles torn, skin shredded, yet his survival instinct surged, heart hammering, lungs gasping against the cold, the chaos of predator and sea merging into an overwhelming storm of sensation and terror. Rescue efforts were immediate. Crew aboard the support boat and lifeguards stationed on nearby jet skis raced toward him, poles striking the water in frantic arcs to ward off the predator, splashing aggressively to signal that the human was not easy prey. Every movement of the mako was lightning fast. The predator circled and snapped within inches of Luis, testing, striking, and retreating only to return seconds later, its immense energy and natural aggression on full display. Each pass threw water into violent roils, twisting Luis's body in currents beyond his control, shredding his wetsuit and life vest, and leaving him exhausted as blood mixed with the salt spray. A vivid reminder of the danger inherent in a creature built to dominate the open sea. The shark struck twice more, circling fast and snapping, each pass precise, its head cutting through the surface with a fluid, terrifying grace that seemed almost mechanical in its efficiency. Luis fought to protect himself, raising his legs and twisting his body, striking out where he could, but the attacks were calculated, overwhelming, and utterly relentless. Observers on the beach could only watch in horror as the cheers of moments before were silenced by gasps and the frantic cries of rescuers commanding the water. Finally, with the combined effort of rescue personnel on jet skis and the support boat, Luis was hauled aboard, unconscious, his body slick with blood, his arm mangled beyond repair, veins and muscles shredded in a way that left no possibility of saving the limb. Medics on site worked rapidly to stabilize him, compressing wounds, administering fluids, and preparing for rapid transfer to a hospital on the island. At the same time, the shocked audience and crew processed the sudden transformation of a planned spectacle into a scene of primal terror. The aftermath was a grim contrast to the spectacle intended for entertainment. Equipment lay scattered, spray and blood mixed across the water, and spectators huddled together, many in disbelief at the rapid, brutal sequence of events that had turned a summer festival into a life-altering emergency. For Luis, the attack marked not only a physical loss but a profound encounter with the raw, unrelenting aggression of one of the ocean's fastest and most unpredictable predators. Even experienced professionals, regardless of their skill, can be at the mercy of the sea and its creatures, the event serving as a vivid lesson in the razor-thin line between thrill and catastrophe. In the weeks and months that followed, the story of the festival circulated widely, serving as a chilling reminder that even in controlled, staged scenarios, the instincts of apex predators like shortfin makos can turn a calculated stunt into a fight for survival in mere seconds. For the organizers, the incident prompted a re-evaluation of safety protocols, including maintaining a safe distance from deep water, as well as increased awareness of local marine wildlife. For Luis, the experience became a defining moment, a sudden collision of human ambition and nature's uncompromising power, leaving scars, loss, and an indelible understanding of the ocean's unpredictability. On March 14, 2022, the waters of Gansbaai, South Africa, lay still under the soft morning sun, their calm surface hiding the restless energy of the ocean below. Among the boats lined along the bay's edge, one carried a group of tourists eager to see the wonders of the sea. At the helm of the excursion was Liam Fraser, a 36-year-old guide who had devoted his life to the water. Raised in a fishing family along the Cape, Liam had grown up with the rhythms of the sea, learning its moods and mysteries from an early age. His fascination with marine life led him to train as a guide, where his knowledge and calm presence earned him respect among both visitors and locals. Liam was known for his patience, often reassuring nervous swimmers with his steady tone and confidence. He strongly believed in teaching people about the creatures of the ocean and loved showing tourists the beauty and vastness of the underwater world. For him, every trip was more than a job. It was a chance to share the magic of the sea with others. On this particular day, he guided a small group of snorkelers eager to glimpse the colorful fish and kelp beds near the coast. The weather appeared perfect, the waves gentle, the air filled with cries of gulls. The group slipped into the water, wearing bright fins and vests, and floated only a few meters from the boat. The stillness of the moment was deceptive. While the tourists adjusted their masks and admired the shifting play of light beneath the surface, Liam swam ahead, scanning the area to ensure it was safe. His body moved easily in the water, each kick practiced and strong. But in the depths below, something massive stirred, hidden in the darker layers where human eyes could not reach. Without warning, the surface exploded. A great white shark surged upward in a violent burst, its huge body breaching directly beneath Liam. The predator's jaws clamped down around his torso with crushing power. The impact was so sudden that the water seemed to erupt in foam and bubbles, scattering gear in every direction. Tourists screamed in shock, flailing in panic as the sea turned chaotic around them. The shark dragged Liam down with terrifying speed. Blood spread in thick clouds, staining the clear water a deep red. The predator shook him fiercely, slamming him against submerged rocks, its movements raw and unstoppable. The sound of churning waves filled the air as fins and masks broke loose, floating uselessly on the surface. The tourists kicked wildly to stay together, their fear amplified by the sight of Liam's figure thrashing in the predator's grip. The shark rose again, lunging with greater force, tossing him through the water like a rag doll. The power of each strike sent ripples racing across the surface, leaving the ocean boiling with violent motion. On the boat, horrified witnesses pulled back in disbelief, their hands pressed against rails as the predator delivered strike after strike. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the giant shark vanished into the deep, leaving behind only drifting fragments of wetsuit, scattered snorkel gear, and a haunting silence that spread across the bay. The silence that followed was almost as heavy as the chaos itself. The sea, which moments earlier had thrashed with foam and red streaks, returned to a deceptive calm. The tourists floated together, their faces pale, eyes wide with shock, each one struggling to process what had just unfolded before them. The water held only fragments of scattered equipment, small reminders of the violence that had erupted and then vanished in an instant. The air was filled with the sound of uneven breaths as if no one dared to speak, and the cries of gulls circling overhead only deepened the sense of dread. The crew pulled survivors quickly back onto the boat, helping them strip off their gear, hands trembling as they steadied their passengers. Some clutched their own arms and shoulders, shaking from both fear and the cold. Others sat motionless, staring into the water as if expecting the dark shape to rise again. But the predator had disappeared, retreating into the depths, leaving behind only the memory of its savage strength. The boat turned back toward shore, its engine roaring louder than usual, as though urgency itself powered its return. The tourists remained silent, their thoughts circling the same scene repeatedly. Some kept their eyes shut, unwilling to glance back at the faint trail of bubbles that still lingered on the surface. A few sobbed quietly, their emotions breaking free now that the immediate danger had passed. Every face carried the same weight: disbelief, fear, and sorrow. When the vessel reached the dock, emergency crews were already waiting, alerted by frantic radio calls. Authorities surrounded the shaken group, offering blankets and water, guiding them gently onto solid ground. Questions began almost at once, but answers felt impossible to give. How could words capture the sheer force of the event? The way the predator had appeared, struck, and vanished within moments. The fragments of wetsuit and gear were gathered as evidence, somber reminders of what the sea had claimed. News of the tragedy spread rapidly across the community. Gansbai, long known for its encounters with great whites, had seen many stories of danger, but few as brutal or as public as this. Residents spoke in hushed tones, some recalling past warnings about the unpredictable behavior of sharks near the seal colonies. Others felt the weight of grief for a man who had grown up among them, who had made his life sharing the ocean's beauty with the world. Marine experts were called to examine the incident, stressing once again that the waters near the Cape were not just tourist attractions, but the domain of apex predators. For them, the attack highlighted the razor-thin line between adventure and danger, a line that had been crossed in mere seconds. For the tourists who had witnessed it firsthand, the memories would linger far beyond the coastline. Each one carried an image burned into their mind. The sudden eruption of the sea, the immense shadow rising from the deep, and the raw force of nature taking control in a way no human could stop. The sea calmed once more in the days that followed, but for those who had been there, it would never look the same again. 3rd, 2025. The turquoise waters of the Bahamas stretched calm and still above the surface, but beneath them lay a maze of twisting caverns that had long captured the fascination of divers. Among those drawn to explore these submerged passageways was Adrian Wells, a seasoned diver from Florida, known for his passion for underwater caves. At 36, he had spent more than a decade charting narrow tunnels and documenting the fragile ecosystems that thrived in these hidden places. His closest friend and dive partner, Miguel Ortega, shared the same passion, traveling with him often to explore the most remote and dangerous sites. Joining them on this expedition were two younger divers, Claire Matthews, a marine geology student eager to record new data, and Thomas Reed, a photographer hoping to capture rare images of the cave's striking formations. Together they prepared for what seemed like another routine survey. Each diver carried lights, mapping equipment, and safety lines, their movements deliberate and cautious as they descended into the semi-submerged cave system. The water was cool and heavy with silence, broken only by the sound of their bubbles echoing against the stone walls. Tight spaces forced them to move slowly, brushing against coral ridges and being careful not to kick up too much sand from the floor. The beams of their dive lights revealed jagged edges, narrow turns, and pockets of deeper shadows where visibility fell to near darkness. For Adrian, this was familiar work. He led the group carefully, marking turns and signaling for pauses whenever the walls narrowed. Miguel followed just behind, keeping an eye on the younger pair who moved with both eagerness and nerves. They knew the dangers of cave diving, disorientation, tight passages, low air, but they trusted in their training and their leader. What none of them expected was the sudden presence of an apex predator inside such a confined space. From the darkness ahead, a massive shape slid into view. At first, it was only a faint shadow moving across the beam of Adrian's light, but within seconds the outline became clear. The broad head and striped body of a large tiger shark. The predator moved with quiet power, its body gliding effortlessly between the cavern walls. For a moment it seemed only curious, drifting closer with steady motions. Then in a sudden burst, everything changed. One of the divers brushed against its side and the shark reacted instantly. Its powerful body twisted, its tail struck with force, ricocheting against the rocky walls. Adrian was slammed hard against a coral ridge, feeling the jagged edges tear across his arm. The confined space magnified every movement, sending clouds of sand and broken stones swirling around them. Visibility dropped as debris filled the water, their light struggling to cut through the chaos. The shark lunged again, its head pressing one of them back against the wall, jaws snapping within inches. The confined walls amplified the sound and power, each strike echoing through the cavern. Its massive body swept through narrow turns, slamming water forward in violent bursts, forcing the divers to scramble for position. Every motion risked pushing them into sharp rocks, their limbs already scraped and bruised from desperate dodges. For endless moments, the predator circled, rushing with bursts of energy, ramming against their bodies and brushing with rough skin that felt like sandpaper, tearing through fabric. The divers' arms shook as they tried to steady themselves, each second a test of will against fear and exhaustion. The narrow cavern became a trap, magnifying the shark's presence and leaving no room for escape. The divers clung to the jagged walls as the cave shook with each violent rush of the tiger shark. Water churned in every direction, turning their lights into scattered beams through clouds of silt and debris. Adrian pressed his wounded arm against his side, the sting of coral cuts spreading through him, while Miguel tried to guide Claire and Thomas away from the narrowest section. The predator circled with steady precision, its bulk filling the cavern each time it swept close, its striped body scraping against stone. The confined space gave the animal the advantage, leaving the divers struggling to dodge as its tail sent powerful waves that knocked them into sharp edges. The shark tested them repeatedly. At times it lunged with terrifying speed, jaws snapping so close they could feel the rush of displaced water. At other moments, it brushed against them deliberately, its rough skin scraping against fabric and leaving marks along wetsuits and exposed skin. Claire's leg was torn against the rock as she tried to push away, blood seeping quickly into the water. Each streak of red added to the tension, the predator's motions becoming sharper the passes closer. Thomas lost grip of his camera as another tail strike slammed him into the wall, the equipment tumbling into the shadows and vanishing in the murk. Time slowed as the group endured the assault, their lungs aching from the strain of controlled breathing and their bodies battered by repeated strikes. Each second brought the risk of a final lunge that could end the struggle instantly. Yet after what felt like hours, the predator shifted. Instead of another charge, it slowed, its large head turning toward the faint glow of open water at the far end of the cavern. With a few powerful sweeps, it glided away, vanishing into the deeper passages as suddenly as it had appeared. For long moments, no one moved. Their hearts pounded in the heavy silence left behind, ears ringing with the memory of tail slaps and snapping jaws. Slowly, Adrian signaled them forward. Each diver moved with caution, dragging themselves along the walls until the beams of their lights finally revealed the wider opening of the exit. When at last they surfaced, gasping into the open air above the lagoon, the relief was overwhelming. Once aboard their small support boat, the extent of their injuries became clear. Adrian's arm was torn and bleeding from coral scrapes. Claire's leg was cut deeply where the stone had sliced her as she evaded the predator. Thomas was badly bruised along his ribs from repeated slams into the walls. Even Miguel, who had managed to keep the group together, bore gashes from where the shark's body had brushed past him. None of the wounds was fatal, but each carried the marks of how close the encounter had been. Word of the attack spread quickly among local divers and guides. Many had known the risks of cave diving, but few imagined a tiger shark would force its way into such confined tunnels. Experts explained that the predator may have been drawn in by movement and disturbance, its behavior amplified by the tight quarters. For the divers, the cave would never be the same. What had once been a place of discovery now held the memory of thrashing water, snapping jaws, and the inescapable weight of the predator's power. On March 19, 2023, the fading light painted the Recife sky in soft gold and orange tones as Miguel Santos strolled along the sandy edge of a shallow estuary. At only 23 years old, Miguel carried the energy of youth and the easy charm that made him beloved among his friends. He grew up in Brazil's northeast, spending his childhood between the crowded streets of the city and the open stretches of shoreline where the sea always seemed to call him back. He was an amateur footballer, a part-time student, and someone who loved the water as much as he loved photography. His girlfriend Camilla often joined him on outings, and together they documented their adventures with cameras and phones, capturing both the vibrant city life and the quieter rhythms of nature. That evening, the couple had chosen the estuary for its calm waters and the way the setting sun shimmered across its surface. The tide moved gently, small ripples reflecting the fiery sky. Birds wheeled overhead while splashes from fish broke the water now and then, sending tiny rings outward. Miguel and Camila laughed as they posed along the shallows, water only reaching their thighs. The warm air was still, broken only by the clicking of the camera and the sound of their movements as they splashed playfully. Neither of them noticed the silent shape moving beneath the surface. Hidden by the murky water and stirred-up sand, a large bull shark cruised slowly toward the estuary's edge. Drawn by the commotion of fish and the splashing of human limbs, it moved with powerful sweeps of its tail, navigating between submerged roots and debris scattered across the channel. The calm surface gave no sign of what lurked below. Miguel shifted further into the shallows, adjusting his stance for another picture. His bare legs sent vibrations into the water, each movement rippling outward. In that instant, the predator surged upward. With an eruption of force, the shark's massive jaws clamped around his leg. The bite tore through flesh and bone, the sheer power dragging him off balance and into the deeper pocket of the estuary. Camilla's laughter turned instantly into terror as she watched Miguel vanish beneath a violent splash. He twisted and kicked frantically, but the shark shook him with brutal strength, slamming his body against the tangled roots beneath the surface. His wetsuit tore, water filling with clouds of sand and blood. Camilla lunged forward, her camera slipping from her hands into the current as she tried desperately to reach him. The shark struck again, jerking him sideways with explosive force. Foam and bubbles rose as Miguel's limbs thrashed against the surface, his movements growing frantic in the predator's grip. The estuary that had moments before glowed with golden calm now churned with chaos, its silence broken by the sounds of splashing, thrashing, and Camilla's panicked cries. Within seconds, the violence reached its peak. The bull shark dragged Miguel beneath, the water swallowing both man and predator into a clouded storm of blood, sand, and broken gear. Camilla reached into the waves, but all that remained on the surface were fragments of clothing, a drifting fin, and the red-stained tide. The suddenness of the attack was absolute, leaving no warning, no chance for escape, and no time for anything but the raw display of power that ended in silence. The surface of the estuary grew still again, but the silence carried a heavy weight. Camilla stood frozen, her arms trembling in the shallow water as she searched for any sign of Miguel. The golden reflection of the sunset now seemed harsh against the waves stained by drifting patches of red. A few scraps of torn material and his floating gear circled slowly in the current, carried outward toward the wider channel. The camera she had dropped moments before lay out of reach, vanishing into the dark below. Her breath came in sharp gasps as she realized there was nothing left to grasp, nothing left to hold on to. Fishermen nearby had heard her cries and began steering their small boat toward the scene. By the time they reached her, Camilla had stumbled onto the sandbank, knees buckling beneath her. They pulled her away from the edge and searched the water desperately, but there was no trace of Miguel. The murky conditions of the estuary hid everything below, and the predator that had taken him was already gone, slipping back into the depths where sight and sound could not follow. News traveled quickly. Local rescue crews were summoned, their boats combing the water with nets and lights as night closed in. The estuary that had moments before been a place of beauty turned into a crowded zone of flashing sirens, hurried voices, and grim preparation. Divers entered cautiously, aware of the danger that still lingered, but hours of searching yielded only fragments of equipment and shredded fabric carried by the current. The tide pushed debris toward the shore, a reminder of the violent seconds that had unfolded. Camilla sat wrapped in a blanket on the sand, her eyes fixed on the dark surface. Shock left her unable to speak, the images of Miguel's final moments repeating endlessly in her mind. Friends and locals tried to comfort her, but nothing could erase the raw memory of what she had witnessed. The suddenness of it, the way the predator had erupted from the calm, haunted her as deeply as the loss itself. Authorities later confirmed what had happened. Bull sharks were well known in Recife, often drawn into rivers and estuaries where fresh water mixed with salt. Their aggressive nature and tolerance for shallow depths made them among the most dangerous predators to humans. The attack on Miguel was described as swift and powerful, a lethal strike delivered with no warning. Experts explained how the murky water and splashing would have triggered the shark's predatory instincts, turning what seemed like a harmless moment in the shallows into a fatal encounter. In the days that followed, tributes poured in from those who knew Miguel. Friends remembered his energy, his love for the ocean, and the countless photographs he had taken during his short life. The beach where the attack happened became a place where candles were lit and flowers were placed, each one a quiet symbol of remembrance. The estuary returned to calm, but for Camilla and those who had witnessed it, the water would never look the same again. The golden sunsets that once reflected beauty now carried with them the memory of how quickly serenity had turned into horror, a lasting reminder of the bull shark's power and the fragility of life in its territory. On March 3, 2024, the Nelson family embarked on what was intended to be a peaceful weekend voyage along the South African coast. Daniel and Rebecca Nelson had spent years exploring the ocean with their two children, 12-year-old Mia and 9-year-old Ethan. The family loved the water more than anything else. They often sailed out during school breaks to enjoy diving, swimming, and fishing. Daniel worked as a marine engineer, fascinated by the ocean's vastness, while Rebecca, a teacher, loved documenting their trips through photos and videos. Together, they taught their children respect for the sea, though none of them imagined how quickly it could turn against them. That morning, the water off Gansby was perfectly still. The sky shone bright, the surface reflecting soft ripples of sunlight. The air carried the familiar scent of salt and warmth, and the gentle hum of waves against the yacht's hull filled the air. The Nelsons anchored near the edge of a reef, an area known for clear visibility and calm currents. A few other small boats drifted nearby, their passengers waving as they passed. Everything felt safe, ordinary, and inviting. Excitement built as the children slipped into their swimsuits and leaned over the side, eager to jump into the blue. Laughter echoed as they splashed and played, drifting a few meters away from the yacht while their parents joined them. The water was cool but soothing, and the family floated together, enjoying the serenity of the moment. Yet beneath them, in the vast space of the deep, something immense was moving. Unbeknownst to the family, a massive 6-meter great white shark was patrolling the same area, drawn closer by the vibrations of movement and sound above. The predator's silhouette moved like a shadow through the green-blue haze, silent and powerful, circling with purpose. From above, the surface gave no sign of what lurked below. Without warning, the calm was shattered. A sudden explosion of water erupted near the children. The enormous shark surged upward, jaws open wide, striking with terrifying speed. Witnesses from nearby boats saw the swirl of foam and the flash of white as the predator clamped onto the children and dragged them beneath the surface. The water turned crimson in seconds, waves splashing violently as panic spread through the family. Rebecca screamed for her children, thrashing toward the spot where the attack had begun. Daniel swam desperately, trying to reach the area, but the predator returned. The great white lunged again, its tail thrashing with brutal force, slamming into the adults as it charged. Daniel was struck hard by the shark's snout, spinning him backward through the water. Rebecca struggled to stay afloat, arms flailing as she was pulled into the churning foam. Nearby boats erupted in chaos as people shouted for help, throwing ropes and life rings into the water. The sea was alive with motion, a violent storm of spray and sound, as the predator circled once more. Every second seemed to stretch endlessly as the massive creature moved through the waves, striking again before vanishing below. The clear blue surface that had seemed so peaceful only minutes before was now filled with broken ripples, scattered debris, and pieces of floating clothing. The laughter that had filled the morning air was gone, replaced by the dreadful silence of open sea and the slow drift of waves reclaiming their calm. The water that had moments earlier shimmered with sunlight now drifted heavy with fragments and silence. Pieces of torn swimwear floated beside empty life rings, rocking gently on the small waves. The once joyful sound of splashing had been replaced by the low hum of nearby boat engines and the faint cries of stunned witnesses. Those aboard nearby vessels stared in disbelief, unable to comprehend how quickly the sea had turned violent. The smooth blue expanse hid everything beneath its surface, leaving no trace but a few ripples and stains fading into the current. A rescue team was dispatched within minutes after radio calls reached the harbor. Boats sped across the water, cutting through the waves with urgency. When they arrived, the scene was eerily calm again. The family's yacht rocked quietly, its ladder still hanging over the edge where they had entered the water. Inside, towels and cups of juice rested untouched, the morning's laughter still hanging faintly in the air. The rescuers searched desperately, pulling in every floating item they could find: goggles, fins, a camera strap, anything that could tell them what had happened in those terrible seconds. Divers entered the water, scanning the depths beneath the yacht. Visibility was poor, and the seafloor below was clouded with drifting sand and bits of broken coral. They found no sign of the family, only distant shadows moving in the gloom before vanishing into the darkness. The enormity of the predator's power became clear as the divers surfaced again, faces pale from what they had seen below. By the time officials reached the area, word of the tragedy had already spread across the coast. Fishermen and locals gathered on shore, their faces marked with shock. The Nelsons were well known in the region, respected and liked for their kindness and adventurous spirit. The reality that an entire family could vanish so swiftly beneath calm waters struck the community deeply. The following day, recovery teams continued searching, finding only small remnants of clothing and pieces of damaged flotation gear scattered far from the original site. Marine experts later examined the reports and confirmed that the predator responsible was likely a mature great white over 6 meters long, one of the largest ever documented near that coastline. They explained that the area around Gansby was a feeding zone for seals and that swimming too far from anchored boats placed swimmers directly in hunting territory. The attack, though rare, showed the raw unpredictability of these waters. In the days that followed, officials enforced new safety measures, warning visitors to remain on board in known shark zones. Local guides and fishermen spoke quietly of the event, calling it one of the most devastating incidents the region had ever witnessed. The calm bay, once filled with holiday boats and laughter, carried an air of sorrow that lingered long after. The Nelson family's yacht was eventually towed back to shore, its deck still wet from the morning mist. The vessel stood as a silent reminder of how swiftly the ocean's beauty could shift into terror. The sea had given the family years of joy, yet in a single morning it had taken everything away, leaving behind only the quiet roll of the waves and a lesson carved deep into memory. On November 28, 2022, the sky over Noosa, Australia, glowed with soft orange light as the sun began to sink beyond the horizon. The waves rolled gently toward the shore, wrapping the coastline in rhythm and calm. Among the surfers that evening was 20-year-old Alex Grant, a local surf coach known for his energy and deep connection with the sea. From the time he was a child, the ocean had been his world. His father had taught him to surf before he could even swim properly, and through the years, he had built his life around those rolling tides. Coaching young surfers had become both his job and his joy, and many knew him as the one who never left the water before the last light disappeared. That November day had been long but satisfying. The lessons were finished, and the beach had begun to quiet as most people packed up their boards. Yet Alex, true to habit, stayed behind. The water had always been his escape, a place where every worry disappeared with the sound of crashing surf. He stood by his board, watching the colors fade from gold to crimson, and decided to catch just one more wave before heading home. As he paddled out, the sea shimmered with scattered silver flashes beneath the surface. Schools of baitfish darted in frantic patterns, a sign that larger predators were nearby. Alex noticed the movement but thought little of it. Such activity was common at dusk when marine life came alive. He pushed forward, eager for his final ride. The cool water glided around him, and the air carried a hint of salt and calm. Then, without warning, the peace shattered. The water beneath him exploded in a burst of motion as a 1.8-meter black-tip shark lunged upward from the dark depths. The impact was so sudden that it felt like being struck by a heavy current. Its powerful jaws clamped around his ankle, teeth slicing cleanly through his wetsuit and deep into muscle and tendon. The pain was instant and blinding. The shark thrashed, twisting violently, sending sprays of foam into the air. Alex kicked and struggled, fighting the pull of the predator as his surfboard rocked beside him. The water around him turned red as the shark's head jerked side to side with brutal force. Instinct took over. He swung his free leg hard, striking at the shark's snout with desperate power. After several seconds that felt endless, the predator released its grip and vanished into the blue. The sea went still again, as if nothing had happened except for the faint echo of his heartbeat and the spreading trail of blood. Dazed and trembling, Alex clung to his board. His foot throbbed, and every movement sent fresh waves of pain shooting up his leg. The setting sun painted the water red and gold, hiding the danger that still lurked below. Though the shark had disappeared, fear gripped him tighter than the wound itself. The surface looked peaceful again, but beneath it, nature's unpredictability had just revealed its sharpest edge. Alex tried to steady himself, his heartbeat pounding louder than the sound of the waves. The ocean swayed beneath him as he clung tightly to his surfboard, his vision hazy from pain and shock. Blood streamed from the deep wound on his ankle, mixing with the salt water and spreading outward in thin red ribbons. He knew he needed to reach the shore quickly before weakness overtook him, or the predator returned. Using his arms, he began paddling with every ounce of strength left in his body. The injured leg trailed limply behind, throbbing with each slight movement. The once peaceful sea now felt vast and threatening, every shadow beneath the surface stirring fear. The minutes stretched endlessly as he pushed through the gentle swells, the fading sunlight casting long streaks of orange across the water. Closer to shore, faint splashes echoed behind him. His friends, who had been gathering their gear on the beach, had noticed the struggle and were now racing toward him. The sight of familiar figures gave him strength. They reached him just as his arms began to give out, grabbing the board and pulling him toward the sand. When they lifted him from the water, the true extent of the injury became clear. His ankle was torn open, the wound deep and bleeding heavily. Without hesitation, one of them pulled the leash from a surfboard and wrapped it tightly around his leg to slow the bleeding. The group worked together, shouting for help as they carried him up the beach. A few beachgoers rushed over with towels and first aid supplies. The sound of sirens soon followed, echoing down the shoreline as paramedics arrived and took control. They placed him on a stretcher, securing his leg and starting treatment right away before speeding him to the nearest hospital. Under the bright lights of the emergency room, doctors cleaned the wound and worked to repair the damaged tendons. The bite had torn deep, but no major artery had been severed. The surgeons later said that the quick response of his friends had saved his life, preventing him from losing too much blood. After several hours of surgery, he was stable but exhausted, his leg wrapped in heavy bandages. News of the attack spread quickly across the local surfing community. Many were shocked that such an incident had occurred so close to shore, and in waters they considered familiar and safe. Marine experts later explained that dusk was a dangerous time, especially when baitfish were present, as sharks often hunted in low light when visibility was poor. The blacktip species, though smaller than others, was fast, strong, and capable of striking without warning when food was near. Weeks later, Alex began physical therapy, learning to walk again while adjusting to the stiffness and scars left by the encounter. Despite the pain and long recovery, his connection to the ocean never faded. Months passed before he returned to the beach, standing quietly at the edge of the surf where it had all happened. The setting sun reflected across the waves, calm yet powerful. Though he would surf again, the experience left him with lasting respect for the unpredictable nature of the sea, a reminder that even a familiar horizon could change in a single moment. On March 8, 2025, the morning sun rose softly over the Brisbane River, casting golden ripples across the calm surface. Marcus Hall, a 28-year-old angler from Queensland, stood near the edge of his small motorboat, preparing his fishing gear for the annual recreational tournament. Fishing had been part of Marcus's life since childhood. His father had taught him the patience of waiting on quiet waters and the excitement of feeling a sudden pull on the line. Over the years, Marcus had grown into a skilled fisherman, known among local competitors for his steady hands and calm focus. This event was one he looked forward to every year, not only for the challenge but for the sense of peace it brought him. The Brisbane River, with its mix of salt and freshwater, had always fascinated him, a place where marine life thrived under the murky current. The day began quietly. Boats dotted the water, anglers casting lines and chatting on radios. The air smelled of fuel and damp earth, and gentle wind brushed across the river's surface. Marcus felt confident as he cast his line into the deeper section near the mangroves, hoping for a large barramundi, a prized catch among competitors. For a long while, nothing stirred. Then his line jerked sharply, his rod bent, and his pulse quickened. The tug was powerful, far stronger than he expected. He steadied his footing, thinking he had hooked an enormous fish. The struggle grew intense as the reel screamed and the rod flexed dangerously close to breaking. Other nearby anglers turned their heads, watching as Marcus braced himself, reeling with all his strength. The water began to churn, bubbles rising in thick bursts, and then without warning the surface erupted. A massive bull shark, nearly 3.5 meters long, exploded upward, jaws snapping around the fish Marcus had been fighting. The force of its lunge sent a spray of brown water high into the air. The sudden impact rocked the small boat, slamming its side with a deep, hollow thud. Marcus stumbled backward as the shark's tail smacked the hull, the sound echoing like thunder across the river. Before he could regain his balance, the second collision came. The predator rammed again, and the boat tilted dangerously. Marcus lost his footing completely and tumbled over the edge, plunging into the dark water below. The river felt cold and heavy, the shock of it stealing his breath. For a brief moment, silence filled his ears, broken only by the sound of bubbles and his racing heartbeat. Then, through the murky current, a shadow appeared. The bull shark's shape was unmistakable, thick, muscular, and moving with steady confidence. It circled him once, brushing its rough skin against his torso like coarse sandpaper. Marcus kicked to keep distance, but the predator returned, this time bumping harder. The third pass came with a quick bite, teeth clamping onto his calf before letting go. Pain seared through his leg, hot and sharp, clouding his mind with panic. Blood drifted through the water in faint red trails, spreading fast in the slow current. The shark's body turned again, drawn back by the scent. Marcus, still clutching his fishing rod, swung wildly, jabbing at the predator's snout in a desperate attempt to drive it off. Each strike felt weaker than the last, yet determination kept him fighting. The next second stretched endlessly, the river swirling with fear and survival. The water churned as Marcus kept striking with all the strength left in his arms. The bull shark twisted sharply, brushing close once more before turning away into the deeper current. His chest heaved as he tried to stay afloat, the pain in his leg pulsing with every kick. The surface rippled with waves and debris from the struggle, and his small boat drifted several meters away, rocking unevenly from the earlier impact. Nearby competitors had seen the commotion and raced their boats toward him. As one vessel reached his position, two men leaned over and pulled him from the river. His leg was torn and bleeding heavily, his body trembling from shock and exhaustion. They laid him flat on the deck while another pressed fabric around the wound to slow the bleeding. The water around them still swirled faintly red as they sped toward the nearest dock. By the time they reached the shore, local officials and medics were already waiting. Marcus was lifted carefully onto a stretcher, his skin pale and cold. The team worked quickly to clean the wound and stabilize him before rushing him to a nearby hospital. Hours later, doctors confirmed he had deep punctures and torn muscle, but no broken bones. The bite had missed major arteries by inches, a narrow escape from what could have been fatal. News of the attack spread across the tournament site and soon reached the city. Organizers called off the event, warning participants about increased bull shark activity in the river. Experts later explained that these sharks often travel far inland through brackish water, drawn by movement and sound, making them one of the few species capable of thriving in both fresh and salt water. For Marcus, the experience left deep scars, both visible and unseen. Weeks of recovery followed, with physical pain slowly fading while memories of that dark, swirling moment remained. He had entered the tournament for sport and calm, but had instead faced one of nature's most fearless predators. The incident reminded many that even quiet rivers could turn dangerous within seconds, where survival depended not on skill alone, but on sheer will to endure. August 14, 2023, the air around Gansbai shimmered with sunlight as the private yacht Aurora drifted calmly over the Atlantic swells. On board, supermodel Alessia Marquez stood at the center of attention. At just 27, she was one of the most famous faces in the world, known for her beauty, charm, and millions of followers who adored every photo she shared. She had built her career through passion and discipline, rising from humble beginnings in Barcelona to global fame. The trip to South Africa was meant to be a reward after a long campaign shoot, a chance to relax and celebrate surrounded by friends and the crystal blue sea she loved so much. The yacht glided gently near the coastline, where the horizon stretched endlessly. The water was so clear that the crew could see glints of fish darting below. Music played softly from the deck while guests laughed, took pictures, and shared drinks. Alessia, radiant in a flowing white cover-up, leaned against the railing, her golden hair blowing in the breeze. She had always been drawn to the camera, to capturing perfect moments. And even now, after hours of celebration, her instincts as a model never left her. Every wave, every glimmer of sunlight felt like a chance for another photo to share with her fans. As the afternoon went on, she decided she wanted one last image, a dramatic selfie with the sea stretching behind her. Ignoring quiet warnings from the crew about the local shark population, she climbed carefully down the small ladder onto the yacht's swim platform. The others watched from above, some amused, others uneasy, as she positioned herself at the edge. The sun painted the sky gold, and the calmness of the ocean made it seem safe. But the beauty of Gansbai's waters was deceptive. Beneath the shimmering surface, a 5.5-meter great white shark was patrolling the area, drawn by the faint sounds and vibrations of the yacht. It moved in wide, slow circles, its pale belly gliding silently through the deep green water. Alessia crouched on the platform, angling her phone for the perfect frame. As she leaned forward, a sudden swell lifted the yacht slightly, causing the surface to shift beneath her feet. Her balance faltered, and with one small slip she fell into the cold Atlantic. The water swallowed her in an instant, sending ripples outward across the still surface. Laughter from the deck turned to panic. Crew members shouted as they saw her resurface, struggling to stay afloat. Then, within seconds, the water beneath her seemed to explode. The enormous great white surged upward with unimaginable force, its jaws wide as it clamped onto her torso. A flash of white and red filled the air as waves crashed against the platform. The predator's strike was fast, violent, and absolute. The crew rushed to throw ropes, poles, and anything that could help, but the sea was already stained a dark color. The shark vanished for a moment, only to return, circling just below the surface. The next lunge came even harder, the water boiling as the massive body twisted and disappeared once more into the depths. The screams faded into stunned silence, and the calm blue that surrounded the yacht only moments before had turned into a scene of chaos and shock. The calm that followed was haunting. The sea around the yacht rippled quietly again, as if nothing had happened. Small waves brushed against the platform where Alessia had stood just moments before. Pieces of fabric drifted slowly on the surface, turning in gentle circles as the crew stared in disbelief. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of the water lapping against the hull. Everyone remained frozen, struggling to understand how the celebration had changed into horror in mere seconds. A call was made for immediate help as nearby boats turned toward the scene. The guests on board tried to scan the water, their eyes searching for any sign of movement, but all they saw was a faint trail fading into the deep blue. The rescue boats arrived quickly, bringing divers and emergency responders. They entered the sea carefully, aware that the predator could still be nearby. The water was dark, with disturbed sand, and visibility was reduced to almost nothing. They searched the surrounding area for nearly an hour, finding only small scraps of material and a floating phone that had once held the last photos she had taken. When the divers finally surfaced, the look on their faces said everything. The search was called off shortly after, with only fragments of her clothing and a few pieces of torn equipment recovered. The sea had taken everything else. The yacht was towed slowly back toward the harbor, its deck scattered with towels, overturned drinks, and phones lying forgotten on the ground. The joy that had filled the air only hours earlier was gone, replaced by a deep, unbearable stillness. News of the tragedy spread rapidly. Within hours, it appeared across every major network, and social media was flooded with shock and sorrow. Millions of fans posted messages of grief, unable to believe that someone so full of life had vanished so suddenly. Photos of her final trip were shared widely, showing her smiling, carefree, and unaware of the danger waiting below. Experts began to speak publicly about the risks of open water photography in shark-prone regions, explaining how even small movements near the surface could attract large predators. In Gansbai, locals were shaken but not surprised. They had long known the waters to be home to some of the largest sharks on Earth, especially during the warmer months when fish and seals gathered near the coast. To them, the sea was beautiful but merciless. It gave people peace and wonder, but it demanded respect in return. The private yacht was moored at the marina for days, its white sides faintly marked with salt and stains from the waves. Visitors left flowers on the dock nearby, creating a quiet memorial that grew larger each morning. The crew who had witnessed the attack struggled to return to the ocean, many saying they could still hear the sound of the splash and see the flash of white beneath the water. Alessia's story became a lasting warning for those who seek beauty without caution. What began as a moment of confidence ended as a stark reminder of nature's power. The ocean had given her fame and joy throughout her career, yet in a single moment of stillness it had claimed her completely, leaving behind only calm waves and silence stretching to the horizon.